I can see a map in the background that would
Yeah.
tell me. Is it even spring up there yet?
We're just hitting spring. We
Okay.
got like 60 today, which is really nice and sunny, but we've had a lot of rain. We've been getting hammered with rain like 4 or 5 days in a row.
Yeah. I think it went by here and made it up to you because we had a similar pattern, which is on,
Yeah.
and now it's back. We had 2 days of sunshine and now the rain is back. So
Yeah. Where are
you
you
got it
located?
coming. What's that?
Where are you at again?
Central New York, right in the Finger Lakes,
Oh, cool.
between Syracuse and Rochester.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think probably it tracks over us and heads right up to you, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, folks, you're in the right spot. We'll be starting up right on time. Wanted to just let you know you're not just listening to people sit around and talk, but you are at Let Your Data Do the Talking, and we'll start right on time. Hope you're uh, looking forward to having some questions for Tim as we move through, but uh, looking forward to this. We've had a couple of excellent webinars and a lot of great questions, and we will have Q&A time here again with Tim, and we'll get that all started in about 2 minutes. Jared, where are you? Is it decent there?
Yeah, I'm in northwest Minnesota, just about in Alexandria, 2 hours northwest of Minneapolis, roughly. But it's dry here, and we might get rain tonight or tomorrow. I don't know. We need it, so it'll be good. And it's been like 90. It's crazy. It's like August
Wow.
here.
Wow.
Our way.
That our way. We'll take it.
Not, I can't imagine that it's 90 there already. That's
Well, not
crazy.
maybe not right. Like it's been 90 a few times, but mid 80s for sure. And
Wow.
you're thinking of ice cream a lot more, if that makes any sense.
Ready for ice cream up in Maine, I'm sure.
Yeah. My kids will eat ice cream in the dead of winter. They don't care.
Oh, goodness. All right, folks. Well, we're going to get started. I want to welcome you all to Ask the Expert webinar series. And as part of the MRAA's month of May and June digital marketing campaign, today we're going to focus on letting your data do the talking, letting it guide you in your decision making. I want to point out that the MRAA Educational Foundation is really the backbone of this campaign that we're doing over this month and next. In the screen that's up, there is a QR code. If you want to learn more about the Educational Foundation, I encourage you to do so. Take a shot of that QR code, go to the site, save it, save that link, and you can go back and visit once we get things going. The Educational Foundation is really supporting this, and Jared's going to tell you a little bit on the next slide about what we've done as a part of their support. So next slide.
Yeah, so we talked about this the last couple of webinars, but if you're new and joining us for the first time, the MRAA Educational Foundation helped us produce the Marine Industry Digital Marketing Report, where it talks about just some of the pain points, some of the wins, of course, too, but more so what's needed for marine dealers out there. One thing that's revealing is that they don't just kind of they don't have the grasp on their digital marketing. Many are out there, they're doing things, but they don't know, hey, is that even working? And some have ultra reliance on a third party to report that what they're doing is working. And some are finding success, and others are still wondering what something even means, from terminology to like they'll hear a lot of terminology thrown in meetings and they're like, I don't know what that means, but okay, you say so. So this gives it more credence, and there's a lot of data behind it to back this. This survey helps support the that there's a need for both knowledge and sharing, and that's what we're doing today here with Tim. We'll help you use that data and then insert it into the CRM and just find more success.
Yeah, and the report really guided us. I mean, when people said, hey, one of the things that keeps coming up for me is I don't have a clue when I sit with my marketing people what some of the terms are. As an example, that was a comment that was made more than once. And so we have a glossary we're going to show you later on where you can figure it out. And I'll be completely honest, Tim shared some slides. I looked on it and I said, well, to Jared, well, what does that stand for? And it's in the glossary. So number one, I had a place to go look, but I also had Jared, which helped. And so we're going to go to the next slide. As a fellow dealer, I know that there's more than digital marketing that's an issue for us. We are going through it right now and have been going through it for a while. All of those things you see on the slides, but I mentioned this in our last webinar. I'll say it again. I truly believe that the MRAA and the resources it provides, including the people that are a part of the MRAA and the subject matter experts that we're connected with, really become the lighthouse for dealers. And in this case, I'll go to the next slide. Tim Schmidt is going to be our lighthouse keeper for today. And he'll introduce himself. I will tell you the time he put into providing us with information that he's going to share and that you're going to be able to go to our website and even get more of is impressive. And I think it's going to be outrageously helpful if we as dealer owners, managers, marketing folks take the time to pursue these things. I know that's challenging, but I do believe it will make a difference. So Tim, it's on you, and we're going to ask questions. If you folks have questions, put them in the chat. I already have a few, so we are planning a Q&A time as well once we get through a little more information. So Tim, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Jared. I'm Tim Schmidt, SVP of Sales at Octane Marketing. Real quick about our company, we're a full service agency, really focused on the digital side of things for marine and auto dealers, a little bit in power sports, but my background personally, so I've been doing this for about 15 years now. The majority of my experience has been working at agencies, serving dealerships, mostly automotive dealerships. And most of my role has been in the background. So I actually just, recently got into new business development. The majority of my experience has been building teams, digital marketing teams within agencies. So, digital strategists and designers, and really building the strategy and the playbook for how we go to market and how we help dealers win. So that's most of my background is like really nerdy behind the keyboard, banging out, campaigns and optimizing and working on strategy. So I know the inner workings of digital marketing really well. And lucky enough, I'm able to explain them and distill it down into a way that makes sense. So that's kind of a 10-second, recap of my career and where I'm coming from. But, spent a lot of time diving into data. And so both, helping service dealers, but also operate in the back end and understand very intimately what works and what doesn't, and very tactically how to get that job done. So that's a bit about me, a bit about our company. My info will be at the end of this. You can always reach out anytime you need to. If you have questions specific after this, happy to help you out. But we're here to talk about a couple of things. First, and most importantly, the meat and potatoes of this is how do we let our data help us make informed decisions, right? And so I posted a little bit earlier today on LinkedIn, gut feelings, and this is the way we always did it, are not real KPIs. Like your intuition, although may be great, is not data. And so if you're not looking at the most important business outcomes that you want out of these investments, you're missing the mark completely. And that's really why we're going to spend the majority of our time today talking about, okay, within your CRM, how should you be looking at this data and extrapolating out of it the insights that you need to determine what's working, what's not. Should I do more or less of X, Y, and Z? Second piece is we're going to go through a little bit more about kind of the next layer of analytics. And so, starting with lead source reporting, but then beyond that, how do you further define what's working and what's not within Google Analytics specific to your digital marketing campaigns? And then we'll wrap it up with a couple of different resources that MRAA and myself help put together. And then also, hey, okay, so now that we know how to look at the data, what are some things that you're seeing that are working? So I'll show you a few things that I think are high impact. Most dealers can get this done, whether it's in-house or through a partner. But that's kind of how we'll wrap things up. And then, like Bernie said, we've got 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. So fire those questions away as I roll through here. We're gonna start off with lead source analysis. So, I'll start by saying CRMs are only as good as the usage, right? If your people aren't using the CRM on a consistent basis and then putting time into it, so they're putting good quality information into the CRM, it's really challenging to get good data out, right? So good data in is going to equal good data out. Bad data in is going to equal bad data out. So everything within, when we're talking about CRM in terms of marketing and understanding what's working and what's not, starting by having good processes in place and then making sure that you manage what you measure, right? So you've got to measure that your people are doing these things, but then go ahead and if you're not seeing what needs to be done, you need to go and correct that and get on top of your team, make this part of your weekly, monthly, quarterly process. So quality data in, consistency of that data being plugged into the system is going to be really the only way you get good data out of your CRM. So that's the baseline. Starting there is really important. A couple of things I'll say. Having consistent lead sourcing rules for your team is really important. So when a lead comes in and it's not very clearly, well, they came in from Google paid search and I know they went to my site to fill the form and I can attribute that lead back to Google paid search. They may have touched multiple pieces of your marketing. How does your team determine how to source that lead, right? And we'll look at some real client data after this. And I'll show you some buckets where there's likely a lot of that happening, right? And how do we put rules in place that make sure that everybody's singing off the same song sheet? So if I go in and put a lead in the system, I'm doing it the same exact way that Bernie does it and the same way that Jared does it, right? There should be no difference, or this is the way I do it, this is the way they do it. Everybody should do that identically. So that's one thing I'll say. I am a big believer that when your teams start, specifically your salespeople, when your salespeople start to see their pay plan get better because the tool of the CRM is helping their job go a lot better, they're going to use it more. And so I think, it starts by, if you don't have a culture right now of being very militant about putting everything into the CRM, I would start that today and say, listen, from today forward, every interaction that you have with a customer goes into the CRM. So the initial input of that lead, if you're doing it manually, then the updates of that lead. Hey, I had a conversation with Mr. Schmidt about X, Y, and Z on this date. It was a phone call. What's your next step? What's your follow-up, right? And now that I'm in business development, I live in Salesforce. Like, that is my job. If I don't have Salesforce, I forget these opportunities exist. I can't do my job the way I need to. So logging every interaction is very important. The other piece that's really important is regular data cleansing and auditing of your data, right? So once a month, once a quarter, once every year, make sure that you've got a plan in place to go in and actually audit that data and say, like, is this happening, right? Like, how many do we have in the other category? Because frankly, other should be a very small number, right? Like, other is basically no lead sourcing. So that's really important, is making sure you're going through that data, auditing and ensuring that your team is leveraging the tool to the best of its ability. And then one other thing to think about is potentially tying the CRM usage to a pay plan, right? So whether it's an incentive thing, hey, if you log 95% of all of your interactions, you get XYZ bonus, or if you don't log at least 80% of your actions, you're going to get, something taken away, right? So having some sort of incentive in place for your people to be using the system. And whether or not that's right for your dealership is totally up to you, obviously, but it's just something to think about. Generally, people respond to incentives, and if you incentivize them for the outcomes you want, you're likely going to see that happen.
Tim, I think Bob McCann, who's one of our other subject matter experts, put in the chat, but I think it fits in that in order to achieve those things, even if you incentivize them, if the leader is using the CRM, looking at it and coming in and asking, hey, I saw that Larry put in a request for some more information. It looks like you reached out to him. How did that go?
Yeah.
Then all of those people recognize, as Bob would say, they know that you're keeping an eye on things. They know that you're using the CRM like you need to as the leader. So they're going to be in a more likely position to use it as well. So I thought that was a great comment from Bob.
Really, really good point. And it's true with employees, just like it is with children, right? Like if you don't model the right behavior, they're never going to know what to be doing next. And in this particular case, yeah, if you know somebody's looking at that report like a report card, you're going to start using it. So it isn't a massive change. It's just a bit of a shift in philosophy. And the other thing that's huge here is dealers are spending a lot of money on CRM software. It's not a free thing that just you get and if we use it, whatever. This needs to be a core piece of your sales operation and service as well, parts, right? It doesn't really matter what business unit we're talking about. CRM needs to be an integral piece of that process. So I won't belabor the point anymore, but starting by just making sure you're using your CRM on every interaction and every sale and every service is going to be kind of like the foundation of everything else we'll talk about. The next piece here is, and this is a conversation that we had kind of leading into this, is there's this concept of bad leads. So when a lead comes in, there might be a bunch of different reasons why you'd mark it as a bad lead. But making that a consistent guideline for your staff is super important, right? Because I'll give you a real life example. I was working with an auto dealer, and he had a handful of salespeople that he noticed were marking leads bad very early, like within 7 to 14 days. If they didn't reply to the lead, he was already marking them a bad lead. And so from a time perspective, 7 to 14 days is not the buying cycle, even for auto. Like it's 30 to 60, probably closer to 60 in most cases. For a boat, it's even longer. It's going to be 90 plus days. So if you're marking leads as bad leads because they didn't answer your first 2 emails, you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because at minimum, they should be marked into your nurture category. So you now have a follow-up, kind of automated, whether it's email or something else to re-engage those customers. But having consistent guidelines to define a bad lead is very important. And I put 3 bullets here, and this might be the way that I would look at it. You might look at this totally differently, but 3 things that you could absolutely say, hey, if 1 or more of these conditions are met, you can mark this as a bad lead. If they haven't met any of these conditions yet, you better not mark that as a bad lead because they still might come through in 60 days, 90 days, right? 120 days. So good parameters, I think, to start off with would be the prospect has not responded to any of your outreach back within 180 days. So if they've taken a half a year and they've never replied to 20 different outreaches, chances are they're no longer interested. I think it's safe to mark them as a bad lead. Some dealers might say, no, it needs to be 365 days. Some might say 90 is enough, right? And so your parameter is not really the important part, right? It's just that you have a defined time frame where you go, yes, this is now categorized as a bad lead. The second one would be a spam lead. And so a few ways to identify that. Obviously, if it's got a phishing link in the comment and it's written like a spam, like a phishing email you might get, mark that as a bad lead. Don't click on the link. Dead phone line, right? So you call the phone line, it's not even in service, or a hard email bounce. Like you get an email bounce right back as soon as you reply to them. And it says, hey, this email no longer exists. All of those things more than likely means that's a spam lead. Another big one that's particular to new boats is the prospect is outside of your new boat territory. And the reason why I think, and this is an idiosyncrasy of marine that doesn't exist within the auto space, right? Car dealers, they've got 5 Toyota dealers in one city. They don't have as defined of territories. Within marine, you guys have very defined territories to the point where if somebody reaches out from Florida and I'm in Maine, I can't sell them the boat. And, I might be able to work something out with the manufacturer, but chances are, like if they're states away from my territory, I can't sell them that new boat. It's important to know that because you want to understand if there are certain lead sources coming through. Maybe it's a marketplace, maybe it's all of your social campaigns or all your organic traffic, whatever it might be. If you're consistently getting leads out of your territory that you're paying for, you need to know that. And there might be 3 other bullet points that you guys come up with on your own end to build this kind of guideline to defining a bad lead. But I think this is a good place to start. One pro tip I would say is put in subcategories for these bad leads. So this was a bad lead, and so it might just be bad lead dash out of territory, bad lead dash no response, bad lead dash spam. So now you'll start to understand by subcategory what type of bad lead was it, and now that'll help you identify source by source over time. Is this one source sending me a lot of spam leads? Well, if that's the case, let's go talk to either the vendor that's delivering that campaign or the people in-house that are doing that work and figure out why. Like, is the targeting not right? Are you, reaching out to websites that just tend to have a lot of spam on them, right? So that is going to help you further dive into these bad leads and identify kind of why are they bad leads, and then which sources are tending to send me those leads that are being defined as bad. So I'll pause there real quick. I guess any questions from your end or from the
Yeah, Tim, I know one of the things, and Bob mentioned it again, the average days from the lead coming in to getting the boat registered, sold, registered, Bob mentioned is about 200 days. There are times when it's been 234 days. It's,
Yep.
there's a long range there. So let me ask you, if there's no response within 180 days, and yet it takes that long to get the boat sold and registered, in a lot of cases, on average, does it make sense to cut them off after 180? I kind of was leaning towards it might, because if they don't communicate at all, then you're going to end up at 365 days before the boat's registered, if they ever respond.
Right.
What do you think?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I went with 180 mainly because I didn't have that data on the exact number of days that it took on average. But the two factors, right? One is you're spending money chasing down leads that aren't responding. And that's a huge piece I'm about to talk about, is like the opportunity cost of handling certain leads over others, right? So if you spin your wheels and you manually make 30 phone calls, like you had to pay somebody to do that work, right? So you're paying money to chase down leads that are more than likely not going to answer. But yeah, and maybe your definition for your dealership is after 180 days, only put them in the automated follow-up bucket. So like drip email campaigns, and don't spend manual time reaching out to these people. And then if they don't reply to that within the next 180 days, maybe now they're a bad lead, right? So, this is really meant to be like a thought starter for you guys, and just starting to think about going through this process and making that definition for yourself. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's 180 days, maybe it's 250 days, right? Like somewhere between probably 180 and 365 makes sense for a marine dealer. But yeah, really good point. And I think it helps too to look at your own data. Like maybe the industry standard is 200 and something days, but maybe for your dealership, it's 150, right? So like knowing what your sales, kind of lead time looks like is important as well.
All right, Tim. So we're going to keep moving along here. One of the key pieces that came out of the survey was that we weren't even sure, a lot of dealers, I'm going to include myself right there, is we're not even sure how to dig in on analyzing where those leads came from. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about, lead source analysis. So I want
Yeah.
to turn that over to you, and we'll keep bringing in some questions from our chat as well as we go along.
Perfect. Awesome. So I when I got asked to help with this, one of the things that, I said initially is like, hey, I'm going to reach out to a handful of my dealers and just see if I can get an export of the last 12 months of their lead source data. And then I can use that as an example, walk people through how you would chop this up in Excel and what kind of data points you should be looking at. The interesting thing, and really actually very eye-opening thing was I reached out to 5 dealers. Of those 5 dealers, 3 of them got back, and these are really good dealers, big market, selling awesome brands. 3 of those dealers said, hey, I'm sorry, we had XYZ issue with tracking during our transition to the CRM. We don't have that data for the last 12 months. Like we just identified this. We're now fixing the problem. We'll have that data moving forward, but I'm sorry, I can't help you. So that was very eye-opening to me that 3 out of 5 don't even have this data. Like not even, oh, it's not perfect. Like I don't have this data. We had 0 lead sourcing for an 8 or 12-month period. And so that was very eye-opening for me. Obviously, made me think, hey, this is a really good topic to be talking about because I think dealers need help, wrapping their head around this and trying to identify like, how do I even start with the data? So luckily was able to track down one dealer that had all this data for me. So I'm going to take you guys through some real world data here. This was a dealer that I reached out to and said, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. They were happy to help. So thank you very much. You know who you are on that. But what they did is I just said, hey, I want to look at a 12-month rolling period, all of the lead sources that you've got in your CRM. I want to see, total deals, right? Whatever financial data you can provide, investment data on how much you put into that over that 12-month period from an investment perspective. And, obviously this came through in like 4 or 5 different tabs, right? And then I had to go through this data and start to, meld it back together. And, one thing that I'll say is every CRM is going to be different, right? So whether you're in Lightspeed or you're in HubSpot or, name the CRMs are all going to have different data outputs, different ways they ingest the data. So that's one thing to call out is like the way that this data is presented here, more than likely will not be the same way you see the data come out of your CRM. What I'll say is conceptually, they're all going to be pushing the same type of information out. It just might have different column headers. So where I say, cost per lead might be cost per opportunity in your CRM, right? So, this is a really good example, a good guideline, a good, kind of way to think about analyzing the data. It's likely not going to be identical to what you see. So I just want to start with that really quick. But so, a few different reports here kind of fed into this. First is all of the lead source and then actual appointment show, right? So I started with a lot of this data. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of different rows here, a lot of different, marketplaces and boat shows and different things that they've got going on and are being sourced as they come into the CRM. But this is a really good place to start in just understanding of all the leads I got in from a source, how many appointments showed up, right? And one step that's missing here I'd like to see is total leads, appointments set, and then appointments showed, right? Because how many people set the appointment and how many people show up, that rate is important to understand. We didn't have that in this case, but we're just looking at total leads, total appointments that showed, forgetting about closed sales. This is important to understand because you'll see like some of these jump off the page, 20%. So of your leads on referral, friend, relative, neighbor, right? This very specific subcategory of the lead source, you're at 22%. So when you get 9 leads, 22% of those are actually going to show up for an appointment. Whereas you're going to see a lot in here that have 0, right? So we got 26 leads from Inventory Marketplace 2. Not a single one showed up for an appointment. Maybe we never set an appointment. Maybe they were all bad leads, right? So starting here is an important place to just start understanding of all the lead sources I've got, which ones tend to produce actual customers that want to come in and buy a boat. I sorted this by total leads. What's interesting to see here is very timely topic is inventory marketplaces and, prices that are going up, going down, going left, going right. So a lot of dealers are starting to inspect this, right? MRAA put together that guide to help dealers understand what all these marketplaces offer. But within your own data, you should be able to look at this and say, okay, when I get leads through my website, they're converting at this rate. And then when I get leads through a marketplace, they're converting at this rate. So it's about, double the appointment show rate. So this is one place I'd recommend starting, just understanding of all the lead sources coming in, how effective are they at actually getting real people to show up for an appointment? Obviously, there's an integral piece there in between, which is your interaction with the customer, right? So, and until you have this data, it's really hard to go back and figure out, did my team do the right things to turn this prospect into a sale? So starting here is a good place. And then, the other reports were a little more detailed here, diving into total deal count, total deal amount, gross profit, and profit per deal. This one I had to calculate column E by specific profit center. So new versus pre-owned versus brokerage, your in-house shows, digital sources broken down. So this was, kind of a big old conglomerate of a lot of the data that you were seeing on the front page. And then I got a specific report here of specifically to all the shows, how many leads did we have going into the show? Meaning somebody reached out and said, hey, I'd like to schedule an appointment to look at this boat or these boats. And then how many actually showed up. And this was eye-opening as well, is, I get a lot of dealers every year going into boat shows. They're like, hey, I really want to get RSVPs going into the show so I can have a schedule. This tells me like most people don't show up for those appointments, right? I mean, you had this major boat show in a huge market, 330 people, 338 signed up for an appointment, only 5 showed up at the show. So maybe instead of dedicating your time towards trying to get VIP appointments ahead of shows for this particular dealer, maybe there's a different incentive structure for next year. Maybe there's a digital scheduling tool that might make it more efficient, reminders, right? So like you can use this information to go, okay, how do we make it better? Or how do we shift gears and try and focus on a different, call to action going into these shows? Maybe it's a bigger draw at the booth with a giveaway, or the options are endless, but starting to understand that data is the first step. And then beyond that, you can really start actually diagnosing and trying to put fixes in place.
The third tab for just a moment. I think there's, as a dealer, and even scroll up a little bit, there's an interesting piece there with current clients and the deal count from them. And, that current clients could also fall into other areas. I was thinking, we're doing a retargeting campaign piece in the next webinar. And, they're a current client, but if we retarget them, they might come to us because of an email contact, or because they act like they look like a walk-in, or any number of other things. So, but clearly one of the other things I would say is current clients, we talk about this at the MRA quite a bit, is they're our best customers. We're already earning something from them, and they know us, so they're likely to come back. I like that piece, but I can see how they could fall into other categories as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Like proof of the pudding is in the eating. When you start to break down gross profit per deal. Now, one thing that I'll say is this current client category, it's really tough to put an investment against that, right? Because there are so many different ways you invest in your current customers, but it's really impossible to go, okay, that was a $58,000 investment last year. So keep that in mind when you're looking at like gross per deal. But yeah, I mean, these customers spend more, your grosses are higher. And that's an important category to look at. What I'll say is, to your point of 88 total leads coming in through, and then 66 total deals, that's a crazy closing percentage. But should these current client lead sources actually be sourced to some other type of marketing? And that's the question of the hour, right? And I could say the same thing for walk-ins, right? Nobody ever just walks into a dealership. ever. Like they don't just walk into it, like car dealership, power sports, marine. They don't just go one day, wake up and go, I'm going to go drive down to Tim's Marine and buy a boat today. They do something first. And 9 times out of 10, they at least make it to your website once, typically a handful of times before they do anything. So making sure that your walk-ins are actual true walk-ins, a big piece to making sure you have walk-ins, current clients, referrals, other, right? The other category should be basically non-existent, because you should have something to categorize every single customer that comes through. And if you start to see that other category creep up and up and up, and in this case, it's 42 leads. So it's not a massive number compared to their overall lead count, but you should make that category as small as possible and start to dive into those individual leads and go, okay, should this have been marked as something else? One really good way to do this, and of course, this is partially anecdotal, is asking customers, even if they're a current client, hey, how did you find us? Did we email you? Was there maybe not how did you find us, but what prompted you to come in, right? And maybe they'll say, well, my motor broke and I thought it was time for a new boat. Okay, that's great. You can now mark them as a current client because they didn't give you anything. But if they said, oh, well, you know what, I saw this ad on Facebook and, it caught my interest. There was a couple boats in there that looked really cool. That's kind of what sparked my outreach. Well, now you can go, okay, great. I'm going to categorize this as lead source social, right? Or even better, a specific campaign if they mention creative, right? So interviewing, asking customers is a really great way. You can also accomplish this very often with like your surveys that you send out after the fact, right? So if you're doing any sort of surveying of your customers or soliciting positive reviews, you can also ask this question in that, after post sale, right? But yeah, asking is the first step there. And you're never going to have other be 0, but it should be as close to 0 as you can get it. And, your list of lead sources should be growing. I guess
Tim, there's a interesting, I think, great comment in the chat about for current clients. I feel this is why it's important to have multi-touch attribution rather than first and or last touch.
Yep.
Multi-touch set up properly in the CRM. Clearly, that's something that needs to get built out, but also that comes down to the leadership person checking on that so that, hey, I know he saw that email, but he saw that email like 4 months ago, showed up today. Why did he show up today? That's a great comment. I think it's Janie that put it out there. So a good one.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because most of my experience lies, probably 12 or 10 of those 15 years lies exclusively with auto dealers. I can look at that piece of it a lot, right? And try and understand that side of it. And, I think a big part is when you're looking at the leads that are coming in and looking at first touch or last touch, years ago, there really weren't the tools available to give partial credit to different, interactions digitally. And this becomes almost impossible to do with something that doesn't occur on the internet, right? So when we talk about multi-touch attribution, it's really only possible with technology, with a connected device. But the second piece of that is in practice tends to become a little challenging to do. What I'll say is almost all you guys should be set up with Google Analytics. If you're not, please do that because that's an important piece here. But they've got a data-driven attribution model. And I'm going to talk through GA4 here in a little bit and talk about some of these things. But their data-driven attribution model will give partial credit to touch points along the path to conversion, right? So let's give you a real world example. I'm up here in Portland, Maine. I'm ready to go buy a new boat. I really want to get offshore and go get after stripers. Perfect. I start Googling. Okay, great. I click on a paid search ad. I go to your website. In first touch or last touch attribution, first touch would give all the credit to Google because that's the very first time I went to your website. They're going to say everything after that point now is attributed back to that one Google click. Not a great way to look at it. The opposite would be last touch, right? Hey, the very last thing they did before they submitted a lead on your website or called was they clicked on an organic link within the search results. That piece of it, right, becomes a little bit more challenging when you're not looking at the offline side of things. The data-driven model is going to look at all of those touch points along that path to purchase or the path to conversion and give partial credit to each. It's not a perfect system because theoretically there was that one kind of pivotal marketing touch point that helped push them over the edge. But at least now you're giving partial credit to all of the touch points. So the paid social click, the paid search click, the organic link click, all of those touch points matter. And philosophically, the way that I look at marketing is multi-channel approach, right? Like you can't really just do one thing and expect it to move the mountains. You need to be present along all those channels, so search and social and everywhere else in between. But yeah, multi-channel attribution is important to be looking at, particularly within your website leads, right? You have the tools available. Like GA4 gives you all of the tools to go determine all of this information. So even if you can't track it in your CRM by paid search, paid social, email campaign, right? All the individual tactics you're doing within your website, you can uncover all of that within Google Analytics. So a couple other things before we move on to GA4 is I just wanted to walk you through the column headers here. So investment was just a number from the dealer on what they invested in that particular initiative. So whether it was one marketplace or their website, which combines the cost to actually run the website, but then all the marketing that goes to it, or boat shows, once you total up the investment there. Total leads is just pure leads, all opportunities that came through this particular lead source. Your cost per lead, just calculation there. Cost per deal, meaning how much money did you spend to get 88 deals. This is the one that I think is really important to look at, is how much are you investing and how many deals do you get out of that? That cost per deal is very eye-opening. And, I get the question all the time, like, hey, which boat shows should we be in? Are we doing too many boat shows? Am I on too many third-party marketplace sites, right? And, when I talk with new prospects, those are a lot of questions I get. And I knew this was correct, but some of this data was very eye-opening. To spend $50,000 to get a deal at a major boat show is a big number. Comparing that to 1,000 through your website or a couple thousand through a marketplace. So, understanding what it costs you money in to get deals out is important. Lead to close percentage. So just total leads that came in and total deals that were actually closed. Again, if you're going to get 1,800 leads from an inventory marketplace and close them at 3%, or you can get half the amount of leads from your website and get them to close at 12%, 11.5%, where do you want your salespeople spending their time, right? And where do you want to invest your dollars now to help drive the outcomes that you're looking for? So, there are other factors here. How big is your market? What does the demand look like in your market? Like there are limiting factors to how much you can spend on the internet to drive leads to your website. But having this data and starting to look at it is really the first step. Beyond that, they were nice enough to give me total deal amount, total deal gross profit, and then calculated out gross profit per deal. So now with this one sheet, you can look at how many leads did I get by source, what did I spend, how many deals did I get out of that, and then what was my gross per deal? Because, and this is another good example, you may say, I'm going to keep investing on this marketplace, even though I close leads at 3%, my gross is higher than my website. So I'm going to keep investing there because it makes sense from a dollars perspective. If these numbers were opposite, it'd be a very clear cut decision to say, maybe I should lower in my investment here and move 24,000 into my website, right? If you were closing deals at a third of the percentage and your gross profit per deal was also lower. So just having this data is going to be the foundation of everything else. But that's kind of how I would look at a CRM lead source report, how I would dissect it, and what I'd be kind of honing in on and tracking. And I would create this as a template and then figure out a way to feed the data in. automate it if you can. If your CRM can provide this as a report, even better. But just starting by trying to understand all this information is the first piece. And then beyond that, it's GA4 and a lot of other analytics tools. So I'll pause there real quick. From a CRM lead source analysis, did you have any other CRM specific questions come through the chat?
Not really. I think you've got a lot of great information to share. So let's jump in and roll along, because it's good stuff you've got to share. I want to get to it.
Awesome. So next piece here is, and there's a link here. So when you get this deck, you'll have a link to this. But the digital marketing glossary, I think, is a good transition, because next we're going to be talking about Google Analytics. There are so many 3-letter acronyms in digital marketing. It'll make your head spin. Because of that, understanding those acronyms and then having a glossary to refer back to is an important piece. So this glossary is going to run you through a ton of different acronyms, terminology, things that you just may or may not be familiar with. I'll go ahead and open that up real quick. But you can see as you're running through here, there's going to be things like, what does analytics mean? What's an API, right? The AI tool for MRAA, campaign ID, right? So there's a lot of things in here. A couple of things that I think are important to be looking at: cost per action. So you're going to see CPA a lot of times in reports, particularly when you're working with marketing companies. CPA stands for cost per action. It does not mean certified public accountant in this particular case. It's not tax time anymore. We have a year. So cost per action is important to understand. That's your cost per business outcome. So if you're looking at form submits, or you're looking at calls or chat and text, it is how much money did you spend to deliver X number of leads or opportunities. So that's an important one. Cost per lead, basically the same thing, but action can be things like a listing detail page on your website, right? So action versus lead, and certain companies will use them interchangeably, but we do have definitions for both in there. A couple other things that I think are important to be looking at, and mainly because we're going to be talking about this here in a second, is UTM. So Urchin Tracking Module, you'll see it abbreviated as UTM. UTM is a little piece of code that goes at the end of your click URL. So if you're saying an email campaign, or you're posting a link on social, you put this little piece of code at the end of that click URL. And when that traffic goes into your website, it's going to be now defined as whatever source, medium, campaign, or creative you plugged into that URL. So I put a link in the next slide here, so you guys will see that in a minute. But there's a free tool, UTM Builder. You click on that link, you plug in your destination URL, and then you fill out some information. Was this from Google? Was this from Facebook? Was it a social campaign? And then maybe a campaign name. So it might be like Spring Sale 2025 as a campaign name. When you do this, all that traffic that comes through those campaigns is going to get categorized properly. If you don't do this, you're kind of relying on Google's sorting technology to understand where did that traffic come from, and then which bucket do I put it in? And it gives you further detail. So let's just take paid social, for example. If you do 2 or 3 different paid social campaigns every month, you might have one that's sales focused for new. You might have a service and parts and storage one. Having a campaign name in that UTM parameter will allow you to identify the difference between those campaigns. So when you're looking in GA4 and you go, okay, here's all my paid social traffic, now you can further define that and go, what was the campaign name? So my spring sale delivered this many leads. I spent this amount of dollars, right? And now it allows you to really break that down further. So UTM is an important one. The other couple of things in here, one metric that I think is important, and kind of touching back to multi-channel attribution, is there are things like video campaigns or display campaigns that generally are more branding based, right? The point of a video is not to get somebody to click on it, go to your website and buy a boat. The point is to get in the back of their mind, hey, you are hopefully somebody who's in market for a boat. When you're ready to go buy, you should come to Tim's Marine. Because of that, you don't get as much direct click attribution out of a video campaign. In that particular case, one of the metrics that I like to look at is a view through conversion. So people who see your ad, don't click on it, but then come back to your website in a 30-day window. So what it's trying to help you understand is the influence of a campaign like video or a campaign like streaming audio, where you're not getting people clicking right on the ad itself, going to your website, filling out forms. You're actually kind of touching them earlier in that process. This will now give you an understanding of how effective were you at messaging to this customer properly to get them to come to your website. So you might see view through conversions reports, but just a few things that I wanted to highlight here on this report. But again, you guys will get a link to this afterwards as well. So it should be a helpful resource as you move forward. All right. So we talked about CRM, understanding through all your lead sources, how to dive into that data, analyze what's working, what's not. That should be a really helpful tool in just helping you from a global perspective, allocate your budget from a marketing perspective on a quarterly, yearly basis. GA4, Google Analytics, is going to help you identify within that website category of lead source, what specifically are we talking about? And so GA4 will basically be a more detailed view of all of that website lead source that you're seeing in that report. A couple of things that I think are important here is, first off, if you don't have Google Analytics on your website, go set it up. It's a free tool. Even if you just reach out to your website company, they can set it up for you. So that's the first step. Second is, I would ask your CRM provider, and again, I don't know which CRMs provide this and which ones don't, but ask them if they can ingest UTM parameters. And so we just talked about UTMs. That's that little bit of code that goes at the end of your URL. If your CRM can ingest that, so when they say, okay, a lead just came in from the website, we're going to flag it as a website lead. If they can also ingest the UTM parameters that were on that person's URL when they clicked on the ad, theoretically, they can now back into all of this GA4 data into your CRM, right? So, well, this was a paid search lead, or this was a paid social lead, or this was an email lead. So if they can do that and automate this process, that's the best case scenario. If they can't, you can still use GA4 to go find that information. So, this was my point here about just using that UTM builder. One area that gets forgotten about most often is email campaigns. So an email might have, 20 different links in it. Making sure that you have clear UTMs on all of those click-through URLs is an important piece. It's probably the most common other traffic that I see in GA4 is email campaigns that aren't being categorized properly. So get UTMs on anything that you're doing from an internet marketing perspective. It could be organic social, paid social. Just make sure you're using the same kind of consistent naming convention every time. So if it's a source Google can also have medium paid and medium organic, right? So making sure that you're going and tagging everything appropriately will help you get better data out of the system. The second piece that's important, above and beyond UTMs are going to help you identify the traffic as it comes into your site. Key events will allow you to identify things that are happening that you want to happen, right? So form submissions, chat and text that occurs on your website, if you have a chat and text widget, phone calls that come from the number on the website, all of these can be tracked by Google Analytics key events. There's plenty of documentation out there on this. Again, this is something that your website company should be able to help you set up as well. So if you don't have key events right now, reach out to those guys and say, hey, I really want to make sure I'm tracking form submits and calls and text. They should be able to help you get that going. If you have third-party tools that run your chat, they should also be able to fire these events. So as long as you know that key events are important and that's going to allow you to track form submits and leads that come through your site, that's really the most important piece I want to get across here. Make sure you have all those set up. And then, the pro tip there on the bottom, I already touched on, but making sure that you have consistency in your UTM parameters. So don't use paid _ social and then paid social with a space and then paid with a dash. Make sure that they're all written the same exact way. So put it in as paid_social every single time. Otherwise, you're going to have 3 different paid social categories when you start breaking down this data in GA4. So yeah, that's Google Analytics. I mean, I think I could probably spend 2 hours just on GA4 because there's so much in there. And frankly, like at this point, when I log in every couple of weeks, something changes. So it's always changing. It's tough to master, but I'll say if you can make GA4 your friend, you're going to be a much better marketer because of it. Because without knowing this data and then layering in multi-channel attribution or data-driven attribution within GA, it's really tough to understand what works and what doesn't. So GA4, huge piece of just kind of furthering your understanding of what's working and what's not within your website. All right. So if there's no questions on GA4, UTM parameters, key events, I'm going to keep chugging here. So we've talked about how to analyze your data, how to set yourself up for success there. The next piece is, okay, Tim, you work with hundreds of dealers every month. What are you seeing work in the market, and how do we get dealers to do more of that? So I'm going to take you through two primary topics here. One is dynamic inventory campaigns. So I'll show you a couple of examples of that and how it works and kind of operationally how you can get going on that. And then the second piece is merchandising on your website. So during the COVID times, there really were no incentives to be heard of, right? People just sold boats at MSRP or above sticker. Nowadays, there's a lot of incentives out there as the inventory is stacked up. Properly merchandising those specials or incentives or offers to your customers across your website is an important piece. So we'll show you some examples of that as well. Cool. All right, so this is a slide from the deck that I usually use, but we call the product boat fuel. Dynamic inventory campaigns is really the more broadly used term. Basically, what you're trying to do here is take your inventory and put it in front of people who are more than likely in market for a boat while they're shopping, or sorry, not while they're shopping, while they're scanning their socials. So these are social ads that run on Facebook and Instagram within news feeds. You can pick multiple different placements, but we found news feeds work best. And the way that this works, there's 2 different ways technically you can operate this. One is you could take a feed from your inventory provider, reformat it, and push it right into Meta, and then run your campaigns that way. The way that we do it, and the way that we found it to be a bit more clean, is we have a scraper that goes onto your website. So it's an automated bot, goes on your website, scrapes all the inventory information that you've got on your site. So images, year, make, model, price, different specs, things like that. That feed then gets pumped into Meta automatically. So the way that we do it is once in the morning, once in the evening, we scrape all the data off your website of live inventory that's on your site. The beauty of that is you don't ever market boats that are already sold, right? As soon as it's sold, it comes off the site, it comes out of the feed, and then you're always marketing new boats that hit inventory. So as soon as you get that boat on your website, within a six-hour stretch or so, that gets picked up and it gets pushed into the feed. What I like about dynamic inventory campaigns is you're not relying on the customer to Google and come find you. You're not relying on a marketplace to pay and drive that traffic in. It's really, if you're targeting the right people, you're really just taking that experience of your website, shopping your inventory, and pushing it right into news feeds. So in my opinion, it's one of the most effective, if not the most effective way to market outside of paid search within the marine space. The other thing I'll say is, most of my experience comes from auto. Car dealers have been doing this for well over a decade. I mean, I can't remember the year we started doing this way back when for car dealers. It doesn't seem to have caught as much steam in the marine space. And why? I don't know exactly. Maybe it's an investment thing. Maybe it's just the companies that are in the space haven't really done a whole lot of this. But I don't see very many of these ads. And to the point where we get a lot of dealers who reach out and go, hey, this must be working, because people come in and they say, I keep getting this ad with the carousel of your inventory, and it keeps bringing me back, and I'm shopping on it, and I'm going to your website and shopping boats. So dynamic inventory campaigns, I think, can be a game changer for a lot of dealers. There are ways you could do this yourself. If you're savvy and you're already running your own meta campaigns, you can probably go find a scraper out there that can help you do this. Obviously, there's companies like us that can help you do this, but it's a very effective way to drive good quality traffic to your listings on your site. The other thing that's nice here is all of the clicks go right through to your listing detail pages, right? So if I click on an image, I land right on that boat, I'm shopping that boat right away. It eliminates like that kind of navigate the website thing where you're like, oh, I got to go find the inventory, then filter it and sort it the way I want. So yeah, the name of the game here is just, first off, target the right people that are in market for a boat, but then secondly, show them the right boats at the right time and hopefully get them to come to your website and fill out a form. So that's boat fuel and dynamic inventory campaigns. Again, like I think everybody should at minimum look into it. Whether or not it's in the cards for your dealership is a decision for you, but I think, you know, focusing on some sort of inventory-based marketing is going to be a win for your dealership.
Running short on time a little bit, Tim, and we can go over a bit as long as we have folks here. We've got a couple of spots there. As you're listing, talking about the incentives, if anybody's got a question out there, I know I've got one or two already. Anybody has one, put them in chat and we'll get Tim to answer them here right before we end.
Cool. Awesome. Wow, it is already one. All right. So last piece here is merchandising your website. I mentioned earlier, specials have become and incentives from manufacturers and from dealers directly have becoming a much bigger piece of the marketing play. Most dealers, you know, and I think visually these look great, but most dealers kind of rely on homepage banners to merchandise incentives and offers. Where I think, you know, that misses the mark is once they get off your homepage, there's no merchandising beyond that. Imagine if you walked into a store expecting this $199 lease on a Camry, and then you show up and there's nothing in the showroom about the $199 lease for the Camry. They don't have paperwork, they've got nothing. So that's kind of the same experience online. You see this offer, and then you're like, I'm in inventory and I'm not being like, where did that offer go? Is it still here? Which boat does it apply to? So this is, you know, kind of, I would say kind of like the standard way that most people are merchandising. Some dealers will have kind of automated, you know, merchandising of specials. You know, I see Yamaha pushes these a lot, and a lot of the boat manufacturers will have automated offers into here as well. So this is another way that you can do it. Where we've been seeing some good success. So one example is like first page load pop-up. So as soon as you get into the website, if you've got a screaming deal, like save up to 10,000 on a new motor, that should be the first thing you tell people. And, you know, there are ways to do it that aren't intrusive, right? Like once you click it off, it's not going to show up again. So you got to work with your website company to do it the right way. But that's another example, is just as soon as you get to the website, open up some sort of specials banner. This is another way. So this is powered by Nitro, specials merchandising tool. But, you know, really the thought here is like, how do we get a more elegant approach to this, where we can list out all of our specials on new and used units all in one place? So, you know, operates like any other page on the site. They've got some of these specials locked. This works really well when you're trying to advertise below MSRP. So you can satisfy the manufacturer by making a one-to-one connection. Once they make that one-to-one connection, now they are a customer, and you can now show them whatever pricing you'd like on the site. So, that's another way. And then, you know, they're also leveraging this widget. So when you're on the homepage, instead of using these banners up here, they're showing all these offers along the right. So I just wanted to touch on that. The other piece real quick before we wrap up is the photos of your inventory, particularly if you're going to do some, you know, dynamic inventory campaigns. The quality of that leading image is huge, and it's huge for marketplaces. It's huge everywhere you market your inventory. So to tie it back to, I think, the last webinar, merchandising, having consistent photos, particularly for your leading image, is going to make dynamic inventory look like a superstar. If you have really bad images or they're inconsistent, you're going to be on the opposite end of that spectrum. So having good quality photos is going to help everywhere. It's going to help on your website, converting that traffic, but also with incentives, right? If you've got good offers, they're not good offers if you don't tell anybody about them. So that's kind of my point there. But the other piece, and I'll leave you with this, your Google business profile is absolutely the #1 organic traffic source to your website. Because of that, these small optimization tips that you'll find in this guide are going to help you have capture as much of that organic traffic as you can. So take a look at this afterwards, run through it. There's a lot of really good information about, how to structure the profile, how to interact with it, and kind of ongoing optimization. But take a look at this as well. This is going to help you drive good quality traffic. So that's all I had.
I know we've got at least one question. Before we jump into that, at least I wanted to mention, folks, save the date. If you haven't been to Dealer Week, I hadn't ever been. I went a couple years ago and I felt foolish, honestly, as a dealer for not having been there before. It's incredible. It's in Tampa this year, December 7th through 10th. Scan that QR code. You can get a link, learn a little more about it, and you can find out exactly when you can get signed up. And the earlier you sign up, the less costly it is. Ask the Expert. Here's a question, Tim, that came in early. There were a few, but I want to set this out there. Is it equally beneficial to attempt to gather market and competitor data to help shape my marketing and advertising efforts? And if so, how might I do that?
So competitor data at the dealer level or competitive data at the manufacturer?
So I presume it's, for me, I would look up the road to the dealer to the north and down the lake, the dealer to the south, east, west, the ones I know that are selling what I sell.
Yep.
And try to gather that data. Do you see that as important in my marketing efforts?
It's interesting because it's really, really important for car dealers because they're all selling almost the same exact configuration of, let's say, Camrys, right? There's like 4 trims of Camry. Their product is very, it's going to be the same no matter what dealer you go to. Now, it's not dissimilar in Marine, but Marine's got so many more configurations of boats that the concept of like a lease deal or a lease price being a driving factor for auto doesn't really exist in Marine. And so on the auto side, we do a ton of this. Like if your Camry lease special is at $199 and the guy down the road's at $149, even if he has more money down and whatever else into that deal, marketing at such a big gap between those lease prices is not going to help your case. And so in a lot of cases, yeah, we will scan the market and go, what are all these other dealers pricing their leases at? And then how do we get a better deal or a more attractive deal on our website? Maybe they've got this crazy high money down deal. You run a 0 down deal and you make that the focus, right? So on the auto side, because I think customers have been so trained to look at incentives, so like lease prices or off MSRP or APR rates, it doesn't seem like that's really the case kind of like psychologically with boat buyers. Like they're looking more at the dollars off MSRP, and that tends to be a dealer by dealer conversation. Where it probably would be most useful is like comparing your service rates, comparing your storage rates, because that's a bit more of like a commodity, right? Like you're going to store my boat in a building and it's going to be warm or it's not going to be warm. Like there's not too much there. So I think on that front, I'd compare my offers a little bit better, but like it's really challenging to do on the new boat side. And I don't know that I think customers are more conditioned to wait for a boat show to get a deal, right? Than they are to wait for an incentive to go buy the boat.
All right. Good to know. Well, let's jump through. Folks, I want to remind you about the Educational Foundation that really helped provide this opportunity with Tim and all the education, the webinars we've been providing. If this education over the course of the month and the coming month are useful, please consider donating to the foundation. It's a great resource to keep educating us as dealers and to really provide some scholarships to members of our community. Spotlight is coming up, and if you haven't gone there, that QR code is going to get you there. Spotlight is full of tools this month to get downloaded and to put to work that support all the things the webinars have been providing, and much, much more. Jared, I know there's a few other things. You want to quickly list those and on the next slide?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim. There's plenty on there, including the new boat marketplace comparison tool. There's also a couple new things that I'll be working on this week and adding. It's a never-ending supply of resources, or it feels like it. Our partners came through in a big way, offering very valuable best practices and to find more success in digital marketing. So I encourage everyone to visit the Spotlight page, and it will be running through June. We know it's such a big topic and a pain point that we'll be running through June.
And I know Tim redacted the information on that Excel spreadsheet. We can get some of that to you so you can understand all those topics to be looking for. But boat marketplaces are a big topic. And if you haven't been to Spotlight or used this QR code last time to get to the boat marketplace tool we've got, I encourage you to go take a look. It is such a handy, simple way to compare what's out there for you. And you saw that One Business's leads were pretty rich coming from a marketplace, but there are lots of options. So check that out. I'll also say, if you want to go back and watch the first two webinars or rewatch this one, they will be on Spotlight. In fact, if you joined us, you'll get the link to this current webinar probably tomorrow. And then on the 21st, be looking for Danny Decker and Sean Horsfall. They are combining really to share a tremendous amount of information. And I did kind of touch on a retargeting campaign focusing on our best customers. And in that one dealer's numbers, you could see that current customers, they led to some great income. So I think that retargeting campaign will be a big piece of that next webinar. And finally, micro learning is coming your way. They are going to be live soon on our website. So please, again, you can get to those through Spotlight. And finally, one big piece is our education champions. I want to recognize their support in making all of our education happen throughout the year, whether it's at Dealer Week, in person, online webinars, blogs, everything. They are immensely supportive of dealers, and they do that through the MRAA. So a big shout out to all of them. Finally, here's Tim's contact. Take a photo of it with your phone. He's willing to answer more questions. If you email him, he'll get responses. And if you have other topics, Jared and I are willing to help as well and guide you to the resources that MRAA has to help you with that. So again, thank you. Tim, any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you. You were a great lighthouse keeper, so to speak, keeping that light shining and giving us a little guidance on where to go. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you at noon on the 21st in our next webinar. Bye now.
Take care.